Guys, today I'm going to tell you exactly why you need to buy an A8 D3, all the things you need to know, everything that's super important, but without chatting a lot of waffle. So we're going to break it down into three, not four, three little breakdowns here. So we're going to do a brief overall summary of the A8 D3, so you can learn about it. We're then going to talk about the negatives, because I feel like it's good to talk about negatives first, before the positives. Because there's no point getting you all excited for buying one, and then you realise that one of the negatives is something that doesn't suit your needs, money, specification, etc. So, without further ado, let's talk about the Audi A8 D3. Just so you know, mine is a short wheelbase. Let's have a look. So this is my high mileage A8 4.2 short wheelbase TDI. Didn't really say that the right way around, but that is it. And I'm going to talk to you about the overall design and overview of the A8 D3 platform overall. So this one is situated right slap bang in the middle, and I'm going to grab the camera and I'm going to walk you around it in just a moment. But so you know, before we start, these were made from 2003/4 into 2010. I've also managed to basically park myself next to someone grinding away, that sort of grinding, in the back of their van, so you will have to get used to that, because trying to find somewhere to record was not really ideal. So without further ado, I'm going to come on down, grab you and take you around this car and show you what it is that makes it special. So this was the successor to the D2, which ran through the late 90s, and this was their big and bold second iteration of the A8. Now, they went all out with this because they really did do some very special things. So I'm not going to talk about it all, but all I'm saying is they went overboard. So the actual chassis and framework of this car was actually alloy cast. It was part of their new space frame system, which meant you could carry huge amounts of mass with very little weight, and it does that super well. So what that does is not only mean that in terms of longevity it doesn't rust, but also it's lighter compared to its other rivals, considering the engine and the mass of the car. So this was Audi's biggest ever model, the A8. It was their flagship. And these, in this setup here, which is one of the cheapest you could get back in the day, would have set you back about 70,000, which is rather insane, because nowadays that would be more over 100 grand. And some of the mad large long wheelbase models, the highest spec they did was in the 6 litre W12. They came in at a whopping 105 to 115,000 back in the day, early 2004 onwards. But what really makes this car special is, within its area of expertise, which is your large executive sedans, it offers quite a lot more at the time than what the alternative other vehicles, such as the S-Class or the 7 Series, offered. So, as we've said, this generation A8 spanned from 2003/4 to 2010, and it featured about 2006/7 time a mild facelift, which involved the rear lights. I'll throw in a photo now next to the car of what the facelift rear lights look like, this one being pre-facelift. And then they updated the bumper. So I've actually got the facelift bumper, but I haven't got the facelift fog lights, which is a bit weird. So I'm going to show you a photo now of the original pre-facelift bumper. Then this is mine, which is the one in between. And then the facelift has different fog light surrounds, which I'll put a photo of now. So in terms of looks and overall aesthetics, that's all that really changes over the years. There are a few interior specification updates, i.e. Bluetooth and things like that. This is really, really annoying. Why are you grinding away in your van, you dirty fuck? Anyway, back to the video. It basically means that in terms of aesthetics, pre or post facelift, they're a fairly sort of linear looking vehicle. Although the rear lights on the facelift are very nice, I must say, at night. Now, in terms of engines, as we're doing an overall discussion, they vast from a tiny 3 litre all the way up to a 6 litre. So we'll run it through as simple as this. So In terms of petrols, they did do a cheap version of this with the 3.2 petrol. Now that you could actually get in front-wheel drive only, which did make it the cheapest of the lot, but also quite uncommon. They also did the 3.6 FSI, which is famous in the R36, an absolute beast of an engine, about 300 horsepower petrol. And then they later did the 4.2 V8 petrol, which is probably the peach of the range in terms of value and what you get for your money for the petrols. And then you could also get, if you put a little bit of money on top, a S8 which only came in this short wheelbase size, and that came with the 5.2 V10, which is crazy. Yeah, literally a Lamborghini engine in this. It's bonkers. And then lastly, only in the long wheelbase, which was the most luxurious of the entire range, was the 6-litre W12, which actually was slightly less powerful than the V10, but had more torque. So actually, you actually would find that the A8 W12 and the S8 were fairly similar in terms of speed. Now, what you also had was the dirty diesel range. So the most popular you're going to see, the biggest and highly rated engine of the lot, is the 3-litre TDI. You cannot go wrong. Bulletproof engine. It's also very common, so you're going to find when you're looking at these, it's going to be very easy to pick up a 3-litre diesel in both long and short wheelbase. Now, if you get yourself an earlier model, you can pick up the 4-litre V8 diesel, which was then superseded by the 4.2 TDI, which is in this. I would genuinely say both are great, but just go for the 4.2. It's going to be more efficient, it's quicker, and I've just found overall I think it's also more reliable. Not that they're not unreliable, because they're great, but it's certainly more reliable. And in terms of diesels, that is as crazy as it got. And that's pretty crazy anyway. And all I'm going to say is, just to throw in there, get a 4.2 diesel. It's the best one. It's the best all-rounder. But that's my opinion, okay? And that's entirely down to whether you live in ULEZ or not, basically. But just get a 4.2 TDI. You have no choice. Just do it. This guy grinding away in his van is doing my nut in, so I'm going to go and move somewhere else. So we will resume the review when the grinding stopped. Don't know what this guy's doing. He's literally locked in his van grinding. Just for the record, before we discuss about the car and the suspension heights and so forth, this is on lowering links, which does make it sit about 40 to 50mm lower than standards. Just be aware that your Audi won't sit this low when you come to actually getting one. But if you do want to know about lowering links, I'll put a link in the description and you can see what they are and what they do. But they make the car look absolutely freaking gangster, even on the OE turbines. So I've placed my tripod over there, and we're going to move away from Mr. Grinder, because Mr. Grinder is grinding my head in while I'm trying to do this video. So, without further ado, let's carry on talking about the negatives on the Audi A8. Okay, I'd like to be negative, but we're going to start with the cons for the A8. They're not negative actually, they're quite an insight into making sure you make the right decision. So, first of all, price, running costs. I can't come up for all of the engines, but I have done a bit of research, so I know where I stand. Running costs. Tax. Tax is the killer for these. So tax sits anywhere between about 380 all the way up to sweltering prices of over £700. For example, my A8 here is £740. So bear in mind that if you're buying one of these, the upkeep is going to be slightly higher than that of your normal car. But you expect when you're buying sort of old school luxury barge that it's going to be more expensive. Now, what this one does, the 4-point TDI, to make up for the high tax, is the fuel is relatively low. Believe it or not, you're thinking to me, it doesn't make any sense. But this 4.2 will achieve on £100 600 plus miles very easily, which is quite surprising. I wasn't expecting that, but it has been cheap to run in terms of fuel. And obviously, the 3-litre TDI is going to be even better. And obviously, your petrols, not so much, but you know, if you get petrol, that's what you pay for, the noise, the fun, etc. Now, insurance. So my insurance did indeed double, but that's more probably based to the fact this is a 4.2 V8 with almost 400 horsepower rather than anything else. So just be aware that the insurance will go up. But I will tell you one thing. Here's something I found out. Very, very interesting study. Did you know that the average age of an Audi driver is, ready, just under 50 years old? Now, what that means is, because they're over 50 years old, is the insurance is relatively low because not many drivers, only about 15% of owners are between the age of 18 and 30. That's Audis generally. So you will find that the A8 is quite reasonable, but again, you can sort of gauge the price of your insurance by what engine you go for. You have got a nice range there to choose between with those. So that's tax, that's insurance, and again, insurance is based on a lot of variables, so don't hold me account for that. And fuel is obviously just down to what engine you buy, but like I said, the 4.2 and again, obviously the 3 litre TDI, very frugal if you're looking for something more for long distance. So that's running costs, just bear that in mind. Secondly, the sort of person that wouldn't probably benefit from the Audi. So if you're a handyman or you need a vehicle where you can, once or twice a week, or maybe for a job, carry parcels, packages, wood, I don't know, whatever you want to carry. The Audi isn't the best because while it has a big boot, you can't put the rear seats down. So if you need a vehicle where the seats can come down and you need that bit of versatility in a car, the Audi probably isn't for you, if I'm honest, because genuinely you cannot put the rear seats down. I don't think that's even an option. I don't think you can put them down at all. I think they're actually bolted in, so you would have to unbolt them. It's a massive kerfuffle for something that just isn't designed to do that. Of course, maybe you probably wouldn't buy a sedan so much for that, but if you are looking for a sedan to occasionally carry stuff in, that's not going to be your car for that reason. I would say, obviously, large families. If you're a large family of 5, I would tell you now that the short wheelbase would be fine for you in terms of room, but in terms of carrying space with the boot and everything combined, I would say really, if you are looking to carry 5 people fairly often, I would definitely look at getting yourself a long wheelbase to give you that little bit of extra room in the back, which is where it's kind of vital because it can get a bit tight in there if you are carrying sort of 3 reasonably sized adults, children, teenagers in there. So just be aware that if you are a family man, it would suit you, but just be aware to check one out and decide between long or short wheelbase depending on your needs in that sense. Like I said, really, in terms of people, there's not really much else I can say. Obviously, if you're younger, the insurance is going to be higher. That's fairly self-explanatory. But really, the A8 generally does literally everything you can think of. It is super versatile, and obviously we'll come to that later on in the pros for buying one. So that's running costs, and that is the sort of person. So let's talk about the A8 generally. What is another con? So another con with it is your servicing costs are going to be higher. Now, a lot of the stuff you're expecting, but it is good to listen through because there will be some things you might not think about. So servicing costs are higher. So for example, your average bog standard 2 litre Peugeot, I know this from experience, your average service kit will cost you about £50 to £60. Everything, all in. The 4.2 TDI I can comment for, and mine came up to around about 150, 200 quid. Bearing in mind that's 10 litres of oil, 2 air filters, fuel filter, blah, 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 all that sort of thing. Just be aware, when you get one of these, you're obviously going to have higher maintenance costs. Now, on the side of maintenance, we don't want to talk about this because we don't buy a car hoping that to happen, but if you do have to have repairs done to the A8, especially the bigger engines, it can become very expensive. Now, believe it or not, not only is the repairs expensive, obviously, because some of the time you have to have the engines taken out of the bigger ones, believe it or not, used parts are mentally overpriced. Mentally. Don't come here stealing my parts now, I'm just saying. So, for example, on a traditional car, a used wing could be between £20 and £50, but on one of these, you're looking at 250 quid, like, what the is going on with that? Worse, the rear lights, all right? There's 4 units. And this is for pre-facelift and facelift, even though facelift are worth more than pre-facelift, but even still. So each of those are about 100 to 200 quid each, 250 quid. So you're talking sort of like £1,000 for a set of rear lights on a used car. If you had like a used Peugeot, a used Focus, you can get a rear light for like 10 quid. People are just throwing them away. Do you know what I mean? You can't even, can't even sell them. So just be aware that another thing to add to that remit is repair costs will be higher than average, which again you would expect with something like this. And another thing that goes along with all that sort of stuff as well is, again, it's really quite important, you are buying what was in the day a very complex, big vehicle with a lot, this one not so much, but a lot of electrics, spec, items on the car that need to be working all the time. And at the end of this video, we're going to follow through with this and discuss common issues with the A8 generally and some of the engines that you might be looking at as well. But yeah, you've got to bear in mind that when you're buying one of these, they are old now and a lot of them have done some mad miles. you are going to have electrical gremlins. You potentially will have suspension issues. So the three vital things you want to check on these is obviously going to be your gearbox, engine, and your air suspension are probably the three most vital of the lot. But yeah, it's just what you have to expect. There's going to be little things you need to look at. And like I said, you need to watch till the end because you're going to see why and what you need to look out for when you come to buy one. So just be aware that these are going to have issues. And funnily enough, I'm being brutally honest with you here, I've had a lot of French cars, right? This is my first proper German car. Now I've got a helicopter. What else wants to get in the way of my video and make so much freaking damn noise? Even the Navy is getting in the way now. Grinder van, now we've got the Navy above us. Yeah, that's excellent. But there we are. That is all the cons that I can think of. It's just going to just generally comes around the running costs and the sort of increased premium of having a premium luxury vehicle. I don't think actually there's anything else that I can really think of in terms of the cons of the A8. That's literally it. If the back seats could be folded down, that's probably one of the biggest gripes and would probably transform this car to make it much more sort of functional for a larger scale of things. But yeah, that is probably all the cons I can generally think of. Well, the positives. There are so many, I'm going to have to try and condense them into a list. Lists, making it short, never works. Ever. But I'm going to try and condense it down to you to make it as simple as possible. I want to say one thing just generally about the A8 is that basically the biggest pro is it does literally everything. So it drives fast, it's comfortable, it's fuel efficient if you get the right engine. It's super good at mile munching. Not only is it comfortable, but it's a mile muncher as well. It's wafty. The air suspension, sublime. It is like driving on pillows, you know, soft and squidgy as it should be. It makes the road, which is a hard surface, feel like you're driving on jelly, or driving on air. It's blissful. But it does do everything, and like I was saying, it's comfortable, it's a performer, it's efficient on fuel. Another thing, it's an excellent off-roader. Not like hardcore off-road, but when you lift it up, obviously you'll get more height than you would with mine, because it's lowered. But when you do take it off-road, this thing's nuts. And I'm telling you, you can't actually drift an Audi A8, because this thing does drift. Now, I was going to insert a video of me drifting it, but I've got to find some grass that's quite large and a bit wet to do it because I value my tyres. The police are here now, so let me guess, I'm going to be in trouble for something else again now, like always. Any other distractions want to come along and come and get in the way of the video, we'll take it. Might be me getting arrested on camera, who knows, for being a hooligan. So yeah, this has actually drifted. It's actually crazy. So basically it's literally everything. Family car, drift wagon, you know, it's a light launcher. You leave everyone behind. It's an ST eater. Yeah, it's just great. You know, I can't really talk about the pros because that is just summarised there. Yeah, I mean, there's nothing else I can say. It's literally the best all-rounder that I can actually think of. And I guess to add to the whole pro, you've got an awesome selection of engines. Sublime choice of engines. They're all actually amazing. Even the old 3.2 from the R32 and the 3.6 300 horsepower beast from the R36. Beautiful engines. 4.2, lovely. 5 litre V10, beautiful. 3 litre TDI, wholesome but reliable. Also sounds lovely when you get a nice map on them. And the 4.2 TDI, it is excellent. What other pros are there? You look like a gangster. And the boot is enough, or big enough, to put a couple of bodies in if you want to be a real gangster. So that is literally it. It's just amazing. Yeah. And I don't really like German cars so much, really, if I'm honest, or the German car community. And I had this car because of certain reasons that fell into place, but I don't regret it, and I certainly love it. It's great. And that says something for me that doesn't really like German cars and doesn't really ever own them because I'm a bit of a Frenchy boy. It's just decent. It's just a nice car. You know, that's it. That is the pros done. Let's get on to what you need to watch out for when you buy one of these, because there's quite a few things. So let's get to it.
So I just want to mention, as part of the pros, the versatility of driving. So the comfort mode is amazing at getting you around the UK in pure, quiet, comfortable, luscious ride quality. Actually, at the same time, on the flip side, when you stick it into dynamic and you put the gearbox into sport, it really can become quite an animal in terms of outright speed, but also cornering ability. For something that's got that many arms and that much of a wallowy suspension setup, it is super stiffened when you put it into that dynamic mode. So you've basically got a car here which can take you to Mars in pure comfort, can race all the STs and all the chavs through London or wherever else you've got to go, and a car that can equally take you off-roading, which is mad. And that's what sets it apart from the S-Class and the 7 Series of the time, and the XJL, to add to that as well. So all of your equivalent, short and long wheelbase luxury barges, they're all rear-wheel drive at this point in time when they were made. So that is the biggest selling point of the Audi overall, is the driving dynamic and the benefits of the Quattro system.
So just to mention, on these cars, as I was saying earlier, these are fitted with air suspension. So now I'm just going to show you the different heights. Now bear in mind, my car is lowered over standard, so my heights are going to sit lower than what yours would. But this car comes with 3 main settings of suspension. So we have lift. Now lift would be used for when you're going to be doing maintenance work on the car, when you're going to be going over rough terrain or off-road, speed bumps, all that sort of thing. Now in lift, these do sit standard very high, and actually they're very capable off-road. So believe it or not, you can generally go green laning in your Audi to an extent. So for a large German luxury sedan to be able to go off-road, that's pretty mental. Second one here, as you can see now, is your comfort mode. Now that is where your suspension drops down a little bit and sits at the ride height. You'll probably keep it at most of the time, which again is fairly substantial, but it allows the most flex in the suspension airbags to give you maximum comfort. And then lastly, we have dynamic, and that sits the car on its ass, like you can literally see now. And it looks lovely. As you can see, you don't get no fingers in that one, son. Obviously, if your car was standard, you would have a few finger arch gap there, more than what I've got. You've basically got, just imagine it right, you've basically got 3 fingers on your lowest setting, you've got 5 fingers on your comfort setting, and then on your height setting on the full range on these, you've got about a fist of clearance in the arch from your tyre. So obviously a decent amount of ground clearance needed for basically any situation. So your suspension will literally suit any situation you literally need, which is what makes this car so versatile and amazing. Well, what do you need to watch out for when you buy an A8 D3? Well, just a few things, I must say. And I've experienced some. We're going to go through them all in no sort of order whatsoever, because I never make anything that makes sense. So, engines. Warm. So, engines. I'm going to say one thing about the entire range, right? Entire range. I can say this, I can vouch on it, right? Not touching wood here, don't need no luck. The engines are sound. Super reliable. There's not really one in the range that's shit. They're just all good. They're just working. And to put you in perspective, I put a recent, I'll show you, I had a recent investigation into the mileage that people can run on the 4.2 TDI as an example. I'm going to show you a screenshot of the owners group. And on there, people are saying mad numbers. You know, I'm thinking here, oh yeah, look at me. I've done 176,000 miles. That is only, you know, almost 8 times around the world. But that's nothing. It's people with this engine, right? It's hot. They have done a massive 400,000 miles, which makes mine look like it's barely been even ran in. And, you know, we could talk even more about the 3-litre TDI, because that's just a beast. And in fact, when the 4.2 petrols, the 5.2s are looked after correctly, the 3.2s, and the 3.6 petrols, they're all great. Just got to find one though that's obviously being looked after. But common problems. So on the diesels, obviously you're going to guess what I'm going to say right now, right? And that is EGR all the time. They are rubbish, awful. And actually, when the DPF system's working efficiently on these, you don't really have problems. But with this sort of mileage now, and having, you know, contributing factors such as poor servicing, cruddy fuel, short journeys being made, you know, this is when you start having these problems. So on these are quite prone for EGR issues. DPF not so much, but EGR. And I have experienced EGR problems, and it's just rather crap, because you basically, when there's EGR problem, it basically makes the car run like you haven't got any turbos at all. It's quite bad, actually. And it's very smoky. So EGRs are something you want to get looked at if you are going to be doing very short journeys. Obviously, you wouldn't really buy one of these for short journeys, but if you are anyone like me, you do short journeys and a lot of long distance, it's well worth looking at getting it tweaked, shall we say, without getting the federales upset. Now, the petrols do have some quite catastrophic problems, and actually, I'm broadly speaking across the entire range here, but mostly petrols, but they can all have this problem. So Audi, in their wisdom, decided they would fit the timing chain to the back of the engine, which in this is, well, I think in pretty much all of these is murder because the engine has to come out. But it's more prone to happen on the petrols due to how they are. But basically, they are known for timing issues. Diesels, not really. The chains are meant to be done between 150 and 200,000, but I can tell you now with this one, it has had the chain done, which is superb. Lovely. But the petrols are quite renowned for having chain issues, because obviously, because people drive them quite hard, don't really get to warm up, all that sort of thing, and they're also, you know, tuned to a bit of a higher level than, say, the sort of, you know, the mild tunes they put on the diesels. You will find that they do have a bit of chain stretch, and some of them will have chain rattle on cold start, something to be very aware of on all of these. And you will hear it, I'm telling you, because when they're real bad, you will sit there on cold start and you will hear it at the back of that engine for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 seconds sometimes. It's very, very obvious. So timing chains are very important. Now, it's unlikely that any of these have probably had them done, let's be real, because it is literally, you've got to take the engine out and it is a mega job. But just be aware of that when you're buying one of these. Obviously, look at the servicing history. Oil changes regularly on these are vital. The diesels especially as well, because they get really sooty and crap. So I've been doing services on this every 6,000 miles. It's actually due again soon. And the oil, right? Don't want to burn my hand here. You can't really see it. The oil there is black. Not too bad, but it is pretty black. It's not black and sooty. It's just, it's still fresh, but it's sooty. Doesn't make any sense. But that does obviously need doing again fairly soon. I like to change one every sort of 6 to 10,000 miles and keep on it. Oil changes are super vital. Maintenance is obviously vital, that's with any car, but it is super vital to try and find one with good service history. On these, so on the diesels, turbos are fairly common, not so much on the 4.2 because they are quite dialed down. If you're buying yourself sort of a fairly highly tuned 3 litre, because they have more capability than these out of the factory with the stock turbos, just be aware turbos can be an issue, so just obviously test for boost, look for smoke, all that sort of thing. And on the petrols, I forgot to say as well, some of them do have head gasket issues and injector problems. Again, that's with your really high mileage engines that haven't been looked after in the slightest. But overall, across the entirety of the range, they are super excellent and very reliable. But like I said, the most important thing, timing chain, turbos, EGRs, and obviously the DPF will tie in with that as well for your diesels. And then with your petrols, you want to check for that chain rattle and make sure you haven't got any misfiring or any milky substance in your coolant, because that is a no, not good. And that is the engine bit done. So what else is there to look for when we go around the Audi? Well, I am going to throw you onto my hand, literally, and we're going to walk around and talk about everything you need to know about what can be an issue on these cars. Pick the worst place possible because we've got a bunch of moped drivers over there. But you know, this is it. When you're recording in public, you cannot have any control over nothing. So, one of the problems, so I mentioned at the start of the video that these have the space frame on them, and the suspension arms and subframes are all alloy based, so they don't rust. They literally do not rust. But that leads to two problems. So the first one is, so basically the car itself doesn't rust, the suspension components don't rust, but the boot, the roof, the doors, they all do. And as you can see, mine's done that, that amount of mileage, that amount of years of driving that. We have got some victims. So we have got here, as you can see, common to see them rusting around the doors. Obviously, make sure when you get one of these, you check around the doors. They do rust there quite badly. Starts like that and it ends up making a hole, which is not ideal. Mine's got a hill on the roof, so obviously you get chipstone damage, and it comes through on here. It normally catches the edge here and it will just eat itself underneath the window, which isn't really ideal, I must say. So that's obviously something to account for on these. And like I said, across the range, you're only really looking at your bonnet, your doors, your roof, and your boot lid are the main areas. So it's not really ideal, but just be aware of that. I think mine's got some on the rear boot lid as well. No, I don't know actually, I might not. In terms of rust anyway, you haven't really got much to worry about with these. It's just going to be all your exterior peripherals. The only other problem you do have with rust is worth checking is on the rear and the front. Some of the components, all the suspension arms and stuff is all sound, but some of the components on the front and the back are going to rust badly. Anti-roll bars on the rear, they literally rust and seize. They're shit. And also, a lot of the bolts and units are used for both the front and the rear suspension are steel inside alloys, so they rust, and then basically, if you ever need to do any work on it, it becomes an absolute nightmare. So if you can lift it up and check underneath, do check for that. Another common thing, as you can imagine, because of these engines, is engine oil leaks. A lot of this stuff's sort of circumstantial to all cars, but just be aware that these do leak. Now, probably one of the more important things about leaks is not just the engine, but the actual Quattro system is kind of vital. The Haldex system is mega vital, and the most expensive part to go wrong on here is basically the rear main diff seal. And on these, when they go bad. Not only do they leak like a absolute nightmare, but it's a very expensive job to have the prop shaft and the whole of the rear diff taken out to have that one tiny seal. You know, it's like a £12, £15 seal, and it ends up becoming mega expensive. So it's super important to check the rear diff, get underneath and check the rear diff and the front diff to make sure they're both not leaking. They can also leak from both the front cups on the front side and the rear side, so make sure when you look underneath, you go directly underneath if you can, as best you can, and look around there for any signs of leaking. Because the problem is when these start to run low, the gearbox hasn't got a setting or anything to tell you that it's running low, and your gearbox will literally just stick together. Not literally, but over time. It's something that's really important to check. So make sure you go around and check visually for any leaks or anything like that on the all-wheel drive system or the engine. A problem. I've actually had this and it's an absolute pain in the ass. So when I bought the car, this door handle here never opened when I first locked the car. Now when you're checking these, you want to check every single one of these because they do have this problem. Now the problem I had with mine was that the lock mechanism on this one here and the rear corner over there had died. They have a motor that unlocks the car, and my unlocking motor had basically seized on both. Now you can take them out and fit a new motor, or you can just buy a new unit for about 25 quid. But make sure when you buy these cars that you unlock it by pressing twice. And check all your doors, because yeah, you actually have to, when you first come into the car, from unlocking it from locked, you have to go in and open it from the handle on the inside, which is really frustrating. It's quite a common problem. I know quite a few people that have had this issue. It's easy to rectify. I do have a video, I'll put it in the link below, but I do have a video to rectify these, but they are quite a pain in the ass. Another thing are your keys. These don't seem that important, but they are. Well, obviously your keys are important, but you know what I'm saying. So the problem with the Audi is, when your keys go dead, the only way you can get in it is through here. There's no emergency keyhole or anything on any of the doors, so you can only get into the boot, but then you can't get into the front from the boot because it's bolted on from the inside. They're just going to push the seats through. So basically, if your keys die, you can't even get in the car. So your keys are pretty vital. So make sure, again, they're both functioning. And another thing to check on these is the keyless. So this one's got keyless on the driver's door, which is, well, helpful to an extent, but not really that helpful. And just check that the keys work for keyless, but they also work inside the keyhole as well. Because if for whatever reason your keyless module goes, you want to make sure your keys still work on the traditional way as well, as they were designed from factory. So mine is all working absolutely perfectly for now. Spoke too soon. So on here you have a green light for your air suspension, which means everything's good, then a yellow light. If any of these stay on or are flashing, then you do have a problem, so make sure you test the air suspension properly. So checking your air suspension is vital. Make sure that the front and the rear sit fairly accurately. As you can see here, the front does sit slightly higher as preset from factory, because if it does drop down low like this, they raise it slightly on the front, so it doesn't mean your wheel fouls on the front of the arch like that, which can be a problem. So make sure they are both as level as they can be. Obviously park it on level ground, all that sort of thing. They need to be level to check that. Another thing to check when you do the suspension is make sure that it rises correctly, which is the front, then the rear. Make sure that it's raising to the same heights as well. Potentially, if it isn't sitting at the right height, one of your suspension arm measurers, that's really not the best way to say it, one of your suspension height sensors will not be working potentially, or the other arm might have come off. They sit inside the arch here, and they will measure each individual wheel to make sure they sit level. Another important thing to do is to see how long it takes to lift. Sometimes it's better to do it with people in the car, and that's quite simply because if it takes a while to lift, you know your pump is either super old or isn't working effectively. So when it comes to using these and using the air, make sure you check that that pump is working. Now, the pump you can't hear audibly. If you can hear it audibly, then you definitely have a problem, but you need to make sure that it raises itself and levels itself correctly. So a few things to check on the inside are the handbrake. Make sure the handbrake is working functionally, holding the car, but also put the handbrake on and make sure it's releasing, and make sure that it holds the car. That's super vital, because a lot of these tend to have handbrake issues. It can become quite expensive to replace calipers and to reset the handbrake. It's a bit of a nightmare. So mine's luckily been done. Discs, pads, the whole lot. It's all been done on mine calipers, so mine is perfect. So make sure your handbrake does work. It saves leaving the car in park all the time and potentially damaging the pinion that holds it in park, because this is quite a heavy car. Another thing to check is quite simple, which is that your centre display works and functions and pops up. Your centre wheel is moving, everything on there as well. And you want to also make sure that your steering wheel moves and sits into position. Not that it's vital, but if it's not working, you can't change the position of it, which is rather annoying. Lastly, another thing to check for as well is all of the electrical gremlins. So you want to check every single function is working. A lot of this, again, is very obvious stuff, but it's one of those things where when you go to buy the car, you might not think about it, and then when it gets there, you go to buy it and it isn't working, and you kick yourself in the foot later on. So you want to make sure all of your heated seats, all your vents are working, air conditioning. Test all of the adjustments on all of the electric seats and the rears, if you've got the electric rears. Test your blinds, the whole lot, everything. Cruise control, everything needs to be checked, because on this car, they actually run 2 ECUs, so potentially if you are having problems with certain parts or certain systems in the car, you could have wiring, water issues, fuse issues, all sorts of electrical problems. So it's really important that you thoroughly check over the car over and over to make sure everything works correctly as it should do. So in and around the windows and the double glazed panels on the side, which goes up to the rear windows, you want to check for any mistings. They tend to go on the inside of the panes. On this part here in the corners, you'll start to see a white misting. So just be aware, if you start to see a white misting, that over time the pane will delaminate, and that can become quite an issue. So make sure that they're all working effectively. Another thing to check on these, because of the age, is that all of the windows work. So on these, the actuators can go for the windows as well, so just make sure they are all working as efficiently as they should do.
So guys, things to look out for. There are just a few things that are very vital for you to look out for on this car. So when you're driving it, obviously the first thing is all your systems, which is what we're talking about earlier. So your cruise control, your parking sensors, your reverse camera if you have one, your radar guiding your cruise control, or your lane assist, whatever that might be, anything related to driving, you need to check that to make sure that is all working in tip-top form. Secondly, engine-wise, now this links in with the gearbox. The most vital thing to check is your gearbox. Now, the first thing is it shifting between gears properly? You know, park, reverse, neutral, drive. If there's any shunting or juddering between changing any of the gears or you know, settings, if there's any juddering between them, which could be exaggerated when parking or changing any of those on a hill, if that's exaggerated, you've got a juddering while you're changing gear, that could suggest anything from an engine mount to damaged valves in the gearbox, low oil, poor oil. That is a first suggestion to check out for. If you have got any hesitation, or it's not downshifting aggressively enough like it should do in the sports mode, it's slow to respond, then these can all be telltale signs of issues with the gearbox. So it's really imperative that you check that, because it's what is vital for the car, obviously. Make sure when you stick it into sports mode, you test that, because what that does is that obviously tells the gearbox that it needs to be at optimum efficiency for performance. So again, that's a good thing to sort of tie in with the engine, especially with your petrols, is you make sure you try it in the normal mode and the sports mode. Make sure the engine's responding correctly. Make sure you haven't got any hesitation, any misfire, any feeling like you haven't got any boost or there's boost lag. You want to make sure that all of that is working smooth and efficiently. Even if you have to test drive a few of the same A8s to get an idea, if you are unsure at any time, obviously go and test drive another one, and that will help you consolidate your decision in whether this A8 is up to the standard that you want it to be. So obviously with that is your engine and gearbox. Obviously checking for smoke, hesitation, that sort of thing, but they're very linked together. So they are the first things to check. Very, very important. If you've got it holding gears for too long, or slamming between gears, or not staying in gears properly, then obviously, you know, stay away. Big issues potentially there. But like I said, overall, the ZF 6-speed gearbox, which is in this generation of car, is very reliable and very robust, even with tuning as well. It's absolutely fine. Another thing to do, which you might not think about, is two things. So the first one is dry shaft. So this is, unless you get the 3.2, a four-wheel drive car, you have 4 dry shafts. You need dry shafts to move your car, so they're rather important. And what you can do is you can go into a car park and you can do full lock left and right, even needing to apply a little bit of throttle if you need to make sure you haven't got any clicking, popping of any of the dry shafts, because that is genuinely, and I've done it myself, I've replaced one, it is a crap job. So make sure that you check those out and make sure you haven't got any of those noises. And the last thing to do is to test the suspension. So make sure that if you keep it in the same setting when you drive it, it's still the same height when you come back. Make sure that it doesn't, the front end doesn't feel firm and the rear end feels really hard. You want to make sure the suspension hasn't dropped on the front or the rear while you've been driving it. You want to test the suspension changing in all the different heights as you're driving as well. Make sure that all works effectively too. And the most important thing is obviously on this car, one bad suspension arm or bush can lead to having to replace 1, 2, 3, or almost all of them, because depending on how old your car is, they can be a nightmare to replace. So that can become quite expensive, and we want to save you from that hassle. So make sure that you drive it over a bumpy road with corners. And when you do that, make sure you put the car in its lowest setting. So what you do by putting it in its lowest setting is you put the most force, most stress, most force, most angle through those suspension arms, joints, ball joints, where they are going to make that noise. It's going to exaggerate it. The more you put that pressure and angle through that suspension, the more you're going to make those problems become obvious. So obviously when you're testing, get your window down, get it in the lowest setting, and make sure you listen out for any knocking and things like that. Which will be your arms. Check for any whirring noises for wheel bearings and things like that as well. They're another common one to check for. All the stuff you'd normally check for on a car, basically. It's super important. So a vital one for your interior checks is your air conditioning. Now, the reason why that is vital when you do that as an interior check is because the cost of replacing either one of the two pumps for the AC, as well as reprogramming and depressurizing and repressurizing, is insane. I'm telling you now, for these cars that can start from 1,500 quid and only go up to about 6, 7, 8 grand maybe for a great model, yeah, it is not worth it. Make sure your AC works. If you want air conditioning, make sure it works, because if it doesn't, it is just too expensive to fix. You're talking 1,500 plus without the labour to get that sorted. It's bonkers. Simple as that. Make sure your air conditioning works if you want that working. So guys, that is the end of the Audi A8 D3 review. I always say every time, it's going to be a short video, straight to the point. Now, like always, I chat a bit of crap in between. It always lasts for ages. So guys, thank you for sticking through till the end. Any questions, anything you need to know, you can either message me on Instagram or comment below, on the comments on this video, and I will be happy to get back to you as soon as I can with any advice that I can offer you in getting yourself your perfect, hopefully, Audi A8. So for now, that marks the end of this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Left my side lights on.